Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and professional growth and opportunity across America. This week on Ameritocracy, while in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to interview Benjamin Moncarz, the Food and Drug Administration's Chief Financial Officer. Benjamin oversees the agency's $7.2 billion budget, ensuring funds align with the FDA's mission to safeguard the health of over 300 million Americans and accelerate scientific innovation that drives the U.S. economy. Benjamin's previous role as the Deputy Chief Financial Officer at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, during the COVID pandemic gave him a unique perspective on managing a large-scale operation in a dynamic environment. In this episode, we discuss the FDA's budget management, resource allocation, and the critical role that partnerships and user fees play in driving scientific innovation. Lastly, we discuss what is the potential of AI and technology in finance operations. I hope you enjoy. Benjamin, how you doing?
Doing well today. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you as well.
Yeah, it's been a bit. Remember our days at FEMA and DHS, right? The very beginning, it seemed everything was perfect, no pandemic. And then as it got to be pandemic, our physical meetings started to be less. And then pretty soon we were Zoom buddies.
Yeah, things definitely changed a lot in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was at DHS, everybody was staying home, but we were in the office, at least the senior executive leadership, where you guys were at FEMA. I believe you were too. A couple of times I remember walking to the response center over there. We were in response mode for COVID, and so we were in the office every day, every day of the week, and some days 7 days a week. Yeah. I remember those days now. Thinking about it. Benjamin, what I wanted to do a little bit was talk to you about your background. Very interested of your different missions, starting out at the census, early on in your career, working your way to FEMA, and then from the FEMA mission to FDA. I'm interested as you started to build your eminence in the finance field and kind of work your way through. Would like to talk a little bit about that. And I guess as we're starting to kind of set the foundation, maybe start with the beginning and kind of your journey into the federal government and potentially to FDA.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I'm originally from Miami Beach, Florida. And growing up, I was the youngest of three boys. So I really looked up to my brother, still do to this day. Mm-hmm. And I really, the foundation I think was really set by my parents, who were university professors at Florida International University. My dad was also in the administration there, and really seeing their level of inspiration, their dedication, just what they did for their students, for the community, for the university was really impressive, and it really set the stage for me in terms of knowing that whatever I got into, I wanted to make the most of it and really dedicate my life. And just seeing even now that they're almost 20 years into retirement, the relationship that they built with former students and the successes that some of their former students had really inspired me. And so moving forward to my college days.
Did you go to FIU?
I did not go to FIU. Okay. I think they would have liked that, but I ended up going to Duke, North Carolina.
Okay, got it.
But just that was just truly inspiring for me. And so moving forward, when I was in college, one of my older brothers was working for the Department of Labor as an economist, and so I had an opportunity one summer to come up to DC and to intern for the U.S. Census Bureau. And at that time, really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my career. And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work in the formulation branch at the Census Bureau. I really learned so much, and being able to step into a position where everybody within the organization was just motivated, dedicated. Was an incredible, cohesive environment. And I remember in my first like few weeks on the job, just the amount that I learned. And I really think about the leadership there, where anytime I had a question, even though I was a college intern, folks would really go out of their way to teach me and to really to show me the technical aspects of the budget. So I was at the Census Bureau for about 3.5 years, and then had an opportunity based on a colleague that I'd worked for at the Census. He reached out to me and he said, "Hey, there's a lot of opportunities at the Department of Homeland Security," and so I ended up moving or applying for a position at DHS, and I came in as a junior budget analyst to the Department of Homeland Security, and so I spent 14 years at DHS. My final 7 years at DHS were with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, with FEMA, and I had the opportunity to be in various roles at FEMA. I was the budget director. I was the deputy chief financial officer. I acted during COVID as the chief financial officer, and I also, because at FEMA, obviously every employee is an emergency manager. So I also had the opportunity at FEMA to serve in the National Response Coordination Center as the resource chief, something that I was never accustomed to, and something that I learned, and was a great experience. I ended up moving on to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and then I've been with the FDA now as the chief financial officer for the last 2 years.
Wow. It was interesting at FEMA. You just mentioned like the emergency response, leadership role that you got is that, there's two things going on at FEMA when you're looking at it as the CFO. One is the critical mission. So, and like you said, everybody's bought into the mission. And then there's the run the organization, and the organization part of it is really great people. And I think what was hard for me a little bit to understand, being from the corporate side, was you guys had a lot of really important administrative functions and some modernizations going on at the same time. I think at that point you were pretty much the acting CFO at that point, but it was just impressive to see like the dual hat that everybody had.
Yeah, the commitment of the FEMA workforce. I mean, there's I had never at that point worked for such a committed workforce when it comes to just the level of dedication. And having been there through COVID was obviously very challenging. But even in the 2017 hurricane season with Harvey, Irma, and Maria, it really challenged the workforce. And to your point, a lot of modernization, a lot of improvements happening, but at the same time, the workforce, we suffered from high attrition at times. And I know it's something that the leadership at DHS and FEMA have really focused on, the hiring aspect, and just making sure that we're fully resourced so that we can ensure that all of the bases are covered when it comes to emergency management.
So talk a little bit about your decision to make the move to FDA. And we'll talk about the FDA and a little bit of its mission and activity. But personally, as you got ready to go there, what drove you? Because you were definitely in a trajectory at FEMA doing great stuff, could have stayed there for quite a long time. What was your motivation, or what was the opportunity?
So all of my government experience, I usually was in a place for 2-3 years. And then I, kind of learned everything that I could learn there, and I figured, let me bring my best practices and just my skills somewhere else. But at FEMA, it was somewhere where I was really looking forward to the audit, internal controls. There's a lot of improvements and enhancements that we were working through, and so I really, in 2022, wasn't envisioning being anywhere else but FEMA, and really thinking about ending my career with the department and with FEMA. I'd been at the department for 14 years at that point, and so. Somebody that I had worked with when I was at the Census Bureau, he was the budget director at Census, and then he happened to be the chief financial officer at the Food and Drug Administration. He reached out to me and indicated that he was getting ready to retire, and he really encouraged me to apply for the position. He thought, based on his experience with me and just kind of keeping up networking over the years, that I would be a great fit for the position and that I should apply for the position. But again, I really wasn't looking to leave FEMA. I wasn't applying anywhere. And, when he reached out, it kind of got me thinking. I reached out to some of my mentors and my advisors and kind of got their feedback. And a lot of those folks essentially encouraged me to apply and say, what do you have to lose? And so that's how I'm at the FDA. And just like FEMA, the FDA has an incredible mission, and it's really, it's an inspiring place to work. And the passion and the dedication of the workforce is amazing to be part of.
Yeah, and that leads us into talking a little bit about the mission for FDA. A lot of people, they hear about it if they're looking at drugs making its way through. They look at it as medical devices. Before I came into government, I had a consulting company outside of here, and it was we did a lot of work for a company called Quintiles at the time. They're in North Carolina, and they were a medical device company. And they would test medical device. That was kind of their service, and it was just fascinating. And the whole FDA area in the Research Triangle area in North Carolina was really built around supporting a lot of different aspects of pharmaceutical development, medical devices, and so. If you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about FDA, the big picture, how it's organized, and then kind of we'll get into the Office of the CFO.
Sure. So the Food and Drug Administration, it's an agency within the Department of Health and Human Services, and the FDA consists of 9 center organizations as well as 13 headquarter offices. And the Food and Drug Administration is responsible for protecting public health by ensuring the efficacy, the safety, and the security of human and animal drugs, of medical products, and of biological product or medical devices and biological products, as well as ensuring the safety of the nation's food supply, cosmetics, and products that emit radiation. And again, just like when I was at DHS, FDA's got a lot of missions, and some other parts of that mission also include protecting, the regulation of the marketing, distribution of tobacco products to ensure safety, as well as reducing the use of tobacco products by minors. And then the one thing that really is compelling to me and really speaks to me about the FDA's mission is the ability to really try to enhance public health by accelerating, innovations in science and really making sure that science-based information and that information is available to the public to really help speed up innovation across the medical field for FDA.
So very similar to what we dealt with at DHS, where you were at FEMA as a component reporting up into DHS. When you're at FDA, reporting up into HHS, so the headquarters, a lot of interaction there with headquarters, or are you guys pretty independent?
Yeah, there is a lot of interaction. It's funny because at the start of COVID, FEMA was very involved. It was a big collaboration with the Department of Health and Human Services and DHS and FEMA. And so I actually was able to build a lot of relationships with the members of the CFO team in the budget office at HHS during the beginning parts of COVID. And so I kept those relationships. And as I was offered the job at FDA, I ended up reaching out. There's a lot of support from the headquarters. I meet regularly with the CFO, the Deputy CFO, the finance office, and there's a lot of partnership and collaboration across the spectrum. Very consistent with what I encountered, a little bit different, but very consistent with DHS and how the DHS CFO really drives the innovation as well as that collaboration across the department.
So as the chief financial officer of FDA, just the way it's set up in government, they have what they call the Office of the CFO or OCFO.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about your organization as the CFO and kind of how you're structured.
Yeah, so my office consists of about approximately 350 personnel, and I'm ultimately responsible for the administration's budget, the financial management, the acquisitions, planning, as well as the enterprise risk management operations. And so it's a fairly decent sized staff, but we do a lot to really help enable the mission of the FDA across the CFO spectrum.
And then the bigger picture too, with the budget that you manage, the president's budget for 2025 came out, I believe, in March, and it kind of came out about $7.2 billion. You talk a little bit about the budget, kind of how it's broken down, and the types of money that kind of is used as within the scope that you guys have.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our budget, I think that one of the really important pieces, and the FDA relies on 2 sources of funding. We rely on the user fee funding as well as the budget authority, the appropriated resources that come from Congress. And within those resources, the user fees typically make up 48% of our funding, and our budget authority, the appropriations that we get from Congress, are about 52%. And so the user fees, on the most part, are based on user fee agreements with industry. where we get together. There's a very close collaboration and relationship between the FDA and industry, and we work together to figure out what those fees are going to look like. And so, as part of that fee setting process, there are commitments made to industry, such as for drug applications, figuring out what that timeline looks like. And so, as part of the negotiation, when we think about 47% of our funding, that is coming through collaboration, partnerships, and really a lot of discussions with industry on user fees. And so a lot of work goes into putting that together. But then when I think about our budget appropriations, the funding that we get through Congress, we're typically in the $3.5 billion range where we get appropriations from Congress. And so we work very closely, obviously, through the department and through OMB and with the Congress to really advocate for the needs for our appropriated resources.
So you talked about the 9 centers or bureaus that the kind of the breakdown. The resource allocations, if I looked at it the way DHS was structured and what I just heard, it reminded me a little bit of USCIS, the immigration side and naturalization side at DHS, where it was 98% fee-based. But on your side, industry, the user fee structure and some of the types of activities structurally, is that something that you guys have the authorities as the executive branch to set? Do you do a lot of activity with Congress to try to set those fees?
Yeah, so the Congress essentially ends up authorizing those user fees, but there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of negotiation, primarily with industry, and industry obviously works very closely with Congress as well. And so there's a lot, there's a lot of back and forth, as a majority of our user fees are based on a 5-year cycle. And so prior to that 5-year cycle coming due, we're starting to meet with, big pharma, with industry, a year and a half, 2 years before those deals are coming due, just to come to an agreement. And then we work very closely with the Congress because it does require a reauthorization through the congressional process. And we do rely annually on the appropriators to also authorize those agreed upon amounts with industry.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize too the importance of kind of that process. Again, some of the topics that I cover on this show is the difference between the executive branch and legislation or the Congress. And embedded in FDA, a big deal is innovation, and big part of the innovation is them building a relationship in industry with you, the tech companies, the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. But also they have the relationship with the legislators, which can be kind of tricky because you can be the hammer, and then on the other side they're working the legislative side, and a lot of those areas, that especially really focused, like I used Raleigh, North Carolina, for example. I'm sure the congressman and the senator for North Carolina gets pretty active in this, and trying to be on the executive branch representing, the current administration's mindset and the philosophy of how they're going to go to market. It's got to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And, in my short time now at FDA, it's been really unique to see just the relationship from the FDA side with industry. We meet regularly. We have performance plans. We have a lot of congressional requirements, 5-year plans, annual plans. We also, we meet quarterly with many of these user fees to make sure that we're on target and to understand what the priorities are. But typically, those 5-year user fee settings are, we're setting the goals on hiring, on on different aspects of what the priorities are for those user fees.
After you guys released your budget in March, and really kind of researching and kind of preparing for this, I noticed, being a previous CFO, it wouldn't be fun if we didn't talk about this, but I noticed, you guys definitely asked for an increase. A big part of it, like you said, is user fees. And what I thought was interesting is that as I was going through that, I was trying to see kind of what was the mix. And this show won't be the show that breaks information because you end up going to Congress. You got to tell the story there, and you've told the story many times in the press. So I'm not bringing out anything here, but for the listeners that are getting involved and kind of hearing this, you could walk away from our discussion right now just saying, hey, user fees could be part of it, or we really haven't talked too much about the appropriators and that. Just to kind of give people a perspective, the pressures on a CFO, clearly it's on the administration, it's on the actual administrator, but for you, you really got to kind of have a command of the situation and being able to explain it in a way that people understand it. So did you talk just a little bit about your process and the number was like $400 or $500 million that we were looking at. And I was just kind of curious because you and I could share war stories about that type of stuff. But I think it'd be interesting for people to kind of hear from your perspective how you go through that process.
Yeah, I mean it's a very it's a lengthy process, and it really as you mentioned, the 25 budget was released earlier this year, but that process started started a long time ago. It started pretty much almost 12 months before with that departmental submission, but there's a lot of back and forth, working very closely within FDA to get the leadership's priorities, working very closely with the Department of Health and Human Services to really advocate for what the priorities are in that budget, and then getting the final feedback and that pass back from the Office of Management and Budget, because obviously there's a lot of priorities that the administration has, that the Secretary of HHS has, that the Commissioner of FDA has. And so really kind of figuring out how do we stay consistent, and how do we make sure that we're really selling, providing that benefit cost ratio, and then as well as really justifying and defending what's in the budget. And from my perspective, it's been great to see. I mean, we've been very consistent, at least on our budget authority side, the last few years, about the importance of pay inflation and the impacts that has on the budget by not getting it. And obviously, the current fiscal environment, it's a very tight environment. We ended up, our 2024 levels were less than our 2023 levels. And so with the pay inflation, it really hurts the mission. And so that communication, those relationships, not only with the appropriators, but also with HHS, with OMB, with those leaders across FDA, to really make sure that we're being consistent on the message that's being told, because the appropriators, as well as a lot of those external stakeholders, talk with a lot of different folks within FDA. And so it's been really, it's been exciting in my time at FDA to really see the consistency of the leadership and the priorities of FDA, and how we've really tried to justify that, not only in the 25 budget, but if you look at our 2023, 2024 president's budgets, there's a consistency for the additional resources that we're asking for in the budget.
Yeah. And when I tie that back to, the big role that I think that FDA has, and you're a big part of it, which is innovation in the industry, and those user fees. I think a lot of, I've talked about this. I did a show not too long ago on kind of the establishment of government's role early on, like 1800s. And one of it was to provide price stability. And so when you have those user fees, you're working that out with industry and being able to go through to come up with values that are predictable for these companies that have to go through a process with you. It seems like the user fee process, one of the items that I saw in the budget when I was kind of going through that was the infrastructure and facilities, and setting up offices even outside the U.S. So it seems like you really do also have to kind of capitalize the whole ecosystem a little bit too, and that's got to be hard to forecast in advance.
Yeah, no, it's challenging, and if you think about the impact that the FDA has, I mean, we for every 21 cents of every dollar that consumers are spending in the U.S., FDA is responsible for regulating that amount. So that's a very important impact. And so we do have, over 18,000 of our employees are working not only within the 50 states, but then also internationally. And so when you look at the economic impact of $3.6 trillion that the FDA is responsible for on an annual basis when it comes to the regulation. We have a growing mission, but we also have a very important mission when it comes to really protecting the public health. And it's really important. It's something that we're continuing to really advocate for those specific resources to make sure that we're prioritizing the right areas.
So a lot of people that aren't involved in this industry, but try to find out how government kind of gets involved with public-private partnerships or kind of spurs that relationship. Can you give some examples of, you're the CFO, so you're probably not on the front line of that mission, but you're clearly a stakeholder that amount of investment that the organization puts to build those relationships. I think the listeners would be pretty impressed with some of the stuff that the FDA does to get out there and build the relationships.
Yeah, no, thinking about our Center for Drugs and our Center for Biologics, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, when you think about the innovation piece, and when you think about the engagement, when it comes to partnerships, whether it's, the domestic partnerships, there's a lot of relationship building. There's a lot that our team really focuses on.
best practices. So within the finance side of this, any of the other organizations that you deal with within HHS where you guys do have a lot of interaction, or is your scope so unique that you guys maybe you set the standards for different organizations within HHS?
We're always closely, linked. And I think about some of the relationships that we have with CDC and with NIH when it comes to the financial side. We're all very invested and really thoughtful right now about artificial intelligence and then what the possibilities are. And so there's been a lot of discussion, but we have a lot of collaboration, and we do have sessions, throughout the year that really focuses on innovation. And part of the HHS strategic plan, we come together to talk about upskilling, to talk about some of the priorities within HHS that our CFO family across the department can really leverage. On it's something where it's really focused on technology, it's focused on people, and really figuring out not only the opportunities within FDA, but also how to leverage those across HHS.
When we were at DHS together, we used to have, I think, every 2 weeks a CFO council with all the CFOs kind of get together and share kind of where we're at. Do you guys do something like that at FDA?
We have that within HHS, and then we even have that within FDA. We have meetings with our executive officers, with our budget leads, and so there are regular scheduled meetings to really share best practices. We recently just came up with a strategic council within the FDA where we have met representatives from each of the centers and offices within FDA that come and kind of talk about some of the priorities that are happening in the finance space or even the CFO space, and how we can leverage those across the agency.
Also covered in the budget when they were talking about some of the drivers that talked about modernization. You talked about a little bit with AI, some of the things that are working its way through. What are some of the drivers right now? What are, when we look at FDA and some of the processes that are out there, or finance and how it supports it, any ideas or any sort of major transformations that you guys are focused on right now?
Within my shop, we've had child applications that many of the centers have adopted when it comes to their financial systems. And so we're undergoing a fairly large innovation modernization now where, we found that, 80% of the core functionality that the centers across FDA are using are the same, but on different platforms. And so right now we're in the process of developing an enterprise-wide application that's going to essentially create one enterprise-wide application for all of FDA. And so it's something that my team is very interested and very excited about, and something that really I think is going to be great for the FDA for many reasons. It's going to obviously help with that one FDA picture, and then kind of similar to when I was at DHS, where there was 86 appropriations, and the department had the whole common appropriation structure. It's very exciting on the financial side right now at FDA in terms of trying to really bring it all together and try to have an apples to apples comparison, where and also save the FDA a considerable amount of money from having one platform.
When you guys are looking at, like you said, the appropriations consolidations or, process or structural stuff that you guys are working through, you look at some of the activities around AI and the use cases. One of the reactions that I see across government is the executive order that came out on AI. One part is it was a great executive order to be able to put out there to provide a framework. And then on the other side, there was a lot of things built into it that were cautionary. We need to be careful that we can trust the model. We need to be careful that it potentially is not biased. We need to make sure that it's safe, that it's, all these things. And my experience has been that a lot of the organizations have been struggling with, how do I go to that next level? Can I do something with it? And I was just kind of curious from your perspective, maybe what would be your view of applying that type of new technology across finance? What would be a process that you might use or a mindset that you talk about with your staff?
It's very exciting to kind of think about like what the potential is for the employee experience, as well as just on the the vendor payments or any of the things that we do that can tend to be very labor intensive. And so also know at the same time that from a risk standpoint, want to make sure that all of the data that's there is clean. But it is something that is very exciting. However, to the point that was provided in that executive order, there is a lot of risk, there are a lot of challenges to it. And so when I think of it as a CFO, I really, what we want to really figure out, how do we improve the employee experience? How do we reduce the number of hours? And we've done a few things with RPA. We've done some things on the AI side in terms of dashboarding and really making, or not on the AI side, but really on the RPA side of making things easier to understand and really providing the dashboarding. We've saved a lot of time for our workforce. But as I think about the future, really, I think it's gonna be important for us to work, not only across FDA, but then also across the department to see what is out there on the financial space that we can leverage, and we can all kind of work on that together.
Yeah, within your organization, Benjamin, if you remember too, at DHS, they had kind of a training and workforce development group. And I was just curious, do you have that type of built into your organization, or do you use a Chico function to kind of keep your folks skilled through the processes and changes that come through?
There are a number of leadership and training programs within FDA, but even within my own team, we have special leadership sessions and leadership engagement sessions when it comes to our GS13 and GS14 workforce. So we have our own leadership programs where we have cohorts of anywhere from 10 to 15 of our employees that'll go through a 6-month leadership session. And something that's really important to me, because I want to make sure that we're obviously we're making our organization a destination workplace, but that we're also doing everything we can to retain and then also grow our workforce, so that if there's a promotion within FDA or within my organization, great, but at least we give the folks an opportunity to really help grow and build. And so we do have different leadership programs within my CFO organization, but there's also a number of leadership initiatives through the Federal Executive Institute and others that FDA really helps to build up and help sponsor.
Do you think the appointment of the AI officer across each component or department has been helpful?
I think it will pay off. I mean, I think we're very early on. There's a lot of challenges. I think that, still trying to really understand what's in the executive order. And so I think over time we'll see, I think 3, 5, 10 years, there'll be a benefit. It's hard now because we're really in the infancy of this and of the guidance that's come out. And so there's just been a lot, you've heard from Congress and from others in terms of just the risk and the challenges that come from this. But I think over a longer period of time, I think there will be an incredible benefit to this.
Benjamin, what I wanted to do now is kind of pivot a little bit to leadership and talk a little bit about you get the opportunity to come to FDA. And one of the things that a lot of the people are familiar or interested in is, what is the approach when you get ready to take on a new big assignment? And so, you knew FEMA, you had the opportunity of working kind of all over there. You get ready, you're getting ready to go over to FDA. How many people did you say you have?
350.
Yeah, 350. Yeah. You need to get your bearings. Any kind of tips or things that you might do to prepare if you get the opportunity you might want to share with people? And
yeah, it's interesting because I had spent so much time at DHS and I had become so comfortable at the department that coming to a new agency where I didn't know anybody at the FDA was quite challenging. So for me, once I received the job offer, I reached out to my predecessor, to the CFO that retired, to try to really get as much information from him. But I also, there's a lot of information that's available on public sites, not only for FDA, but across the federal government when it comes to budget and briefs, president's budgets, strategic plans, the mission statement, the vision. And so I really looked online and I did a lot of research of, what the priorities were. I looked at testimony, the commissioner of FDA, Dr. Califf at the time. There's a lot of testimony out there in terms of what the priorities are, what the challenges are. I also did a lot of research in terms of online, just kind of looking at what the Congress is focused on, what the department's focused on, what are the Department of Health and Human Services priorities. And I also, there were a few folks that were working at FEMA at that time that had come from FDA or had worked at FDA earlier in their careers. And so I did reach out to anybody I knew that worked at the FDA just to better understand the culture, because on my first day, it was just, I never had been to that facility. I knew very little about the mission of the FDA. It's amazing. Had no idea that there was over 18,000 employees, and also just the complexity of the mission. And so it was really just a lot of reading, and then a lot of also engaging folks that I knew had worked at FDA. Also had a very close colleague of mine that I'd worked with early in my DHS career, and that had been at the FDA now for over 10 years, and he's still there. And so I reached out to him and really, got all the feedback and got all the just any information that I could get on, the priorities and the challenges that the workforce within FDA faces.
Yeah, I think your point is really pertinent. Is a lot of people take jobs. I mean, I'm at IBM. Somebody will get a job in a role called developer, and they're like, I'm going to be the best developer, and they'll go do that job. And or they'll come in as a partner or a lead executive. And it's interesting what you said is I too am used to kind of going into a lot of new organizations, and the first thing I want to know is what's the org structure. And then, like you said, in federal government, I think it's a blessing as the budgets in brief, the budget justifications that are sent to Congress, all that stuff, and then again, just really smart reading the transcripts to find out, hey, what's my boss care about? And so at IBM, even with the teams that I lead, I tell people watch the earnings call at a minimum. Read the annual report. Yeah. But it's surprising that sometimes you don't see people being that alert. And I think just one step, if people get anything out of this interview, I think it would be, no matter what level you're at in an organization, you should try to get your perspective. Like, what am I supporting? And I think with that, it also kind of gives you the visibility of like, what can you focus your time on? And so I appreciate you sharing that. I think that that's a really important thing that people can do at every level.
Well, and I'll add, I did a lot of that once I received the job, but I also, I had to interview for the position, with the commissioner, with the principal deputy commissioner. So even before those interviews, you want to go into those interviews, even though you don't work there, and you want to not only be able to talk about yourself and about why you're experienced for the role, but why are you interested in going to the FDA? And so I think it's really important, as I've seen throughout my career, that before you interview for positions at other agencies or wherever you may interview, that you really do research on the company. Key aspects of that of the program, so you can mention it in the interview, but then also you may get asked about what you would do, and it's good to know and be able to provide anecdotes of things that are happening at that organization that really show the folks that are interviewing you that you know what you're talking about, and that you're going to do the research and really look into it.
You sound like you have a little bit of an operational approach when you came in. I know I always think it's important to physically get out of the office and see the operation. Do you find it easier once you get out there and you can actually see maybe the 6 or 7 of the 9 areas when you're actually going to Congress, or you're trying to get the principal ready to have a discussion with Congress or somebody, when you've physically been out there to see it? And is that kind of sounds like what your approach is. And with that, what was the most interesting thing that you've been able to see when you go out there and kind of touch the ground?
I think it's really, it's so incredibly important. And I was really, one of the modernizations, one of the investments that I was able to go for ribbon cutting and really meet a lot of the key personnel was the Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center in Winchester, Massachusetts. And I was really, being able to see and then just hear the passion of how long it took for that facility to be modernized, and all of the challenges on funding and all of the wins. And then I think about my visits not only to the WEAC, with the Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center, but then also our National Center for Toxicological Research in Arkansas, and how just impressive it is to be able to really go out and see the mission. And you're right. I think it makes a very big difference when you're out there, especially in my role, advocating for resources to really understand what the challenges are of some of these facilities, and then also what the opportunities are and why we're prioritizing investment in some of these areas.
Within FDA, any of the organizations, I don't want to ask you to pick one kid over another, but any of the organizations that you support better than others of trying to raise their visibility of their business problem, or to get your support that you think is interesting? And I'll just kind of I'll talk about this from the concept of, I always use this example at DHS, the Coast Guard versus every other organization. Coast Guard popular, Coast Guard, they are masters on the Hill, sometimes even get ahead of the department. You try and set a budget and you work with them, and then you find out they actually have worked plus ups and some other stuff out there. And then the legislators really, everybody that has the Coast Guard station in their city, or something that is big, or the fleet deployment areas. And so when I'd go out there, they would have me go for trips that they're trying to get offshore patrol cutters funded through Congress, and they really need somebody to be an evangel to keep those big things moving. And you'd go, they'd organize it. You'd be out there with a congressperson or two or three or four, possibly the U.S. senator for the area, and they're taking you through. And when you come back, it's like nothing compared to what I just went through. And I know that's an extreme example, but within FDA, any of the other organizations, especially after the pandemic, some of the ones that you've mentioned have raised their profile. So I was just kind of curious if any stories or any perspective that you have on that.
It's great. It's a great question. And there was obviously a lot of investment during COVID, and so right now it's kind of the opposite end of the Coast Guard story. But right now there's just more so just lots of funding challenges and funding concerns based on a lot of these one-time investments as to what the future holds. But to answer your question, having worked very closely with the Coast Guard, there's no organization probably outside of DOD within government that really compares. But no, I haven't really experienced that with the FDA.
Yeah, I always ask CFOs that because I think that experience, I use that up as a best practice. I think that environment's really unique, but it's almost unfair.
Well, yeah, they also have the apparatus where the Coast Guard also has they have staff that work feet away from the appropriators.
No. One of the last questions. So within the area of your functional capability, which is finance, and you talked about your career path, and then you've now pointed it to a mission, FDA, and then you've had the opportunity to shift between the different missions of emergency management and the FDA. Any advice that you would give people that when they take a career and they think, hey, I got to focus on something. Should I be the best person in emergency management and make my way up to be the FEMA director, or do I end up being the best CFO person and I could take that anywhere across government? And you and we're talking finance, but I think your mindset could be applied to any functional skill, IT, finance, HR, payroll, whatever. I'd just be kind of curious your perspective, how you look at that.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me that I think, there's a few things, but I think the networking and the relationship piece are important. But for me also, it's all about what are you doing to make things better around you. Doesn't matter if you're in government, a junior employee, a mid-level employee, or senior level employee. How are you making those around you better, and how are you inspiring those around you to be to provide them the information they need? And so I think I think of something a leader once taught me about the say do. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And so I think it all comes down to the relationships and the communication. And I learned from General Taylor with the Office of Intelligence and Analysis at DHS was really the importance of setting yourself out there so that folks saw you as a valuable contributor, somebody that was really solutions oriented and not bringing problems or creating problems, but making the organization better from wherever you were and leading from wherever you were. And I think about my career up to this point, and many of the successes that I've had, and it's really some of it's attributed to good luck, but a lot of it's attributed to just networking and making really not only managing up, but working very closely with colleagues and making sure that everybody across the organization sees your value and understands your value. And it's not just about trying to impress the leadership, but really trying to make a difference not only for the organization, but for everybody around you.
Yeah, that's awesome, Benjamin. I like I said, I got to have the pleasure of watching you over at FEMA and then coming into FDA. I just thought it'd be just really interesting to be able to kind of give people kind of that view. And I think the networking, like you're talking about, just becomes, something that I do see. And we talked about this off mic, is the investment that it takes means you got to spend a little bit more time away from maybe what you're doing 40 to 80 hours a week and getting out there and more than just your networking with your peers, like you said, but actually getting out there. Any from people that might be interested in coming to DC or being in the federal government, or credentials or things that maybe around finance or anything, you see the current work environment. we both see shortages of people that are hiring managers to try to get more people. You know, when I hear about AI and some of the benefits that could come, isn't so much that it's going to take jobs. There's a lot of empty jobs in the government right now that potentially could be done more effectively with the people that they do have. And so I was just kind of curious, anything you think of off the top of your head that you would think might be helpful for younger folks that are looking at this as a career path?
Yeah, I mean, I think just really there's a lot of opportunities, you know, in the federal government on the USA jobs, but I think really trying to get an opportunity to intern or to really, you know, understand the federal budgeting process. And there's a lot of training out there on federal budget process. For me, I was very fortunate, you know, my first few weeks as an intern to have somebody sit next to me and teach me like every last intricacy. But I would say really just, you know, try to get an opportunity. And if not, you know, there's training, but there's, as you mentioned, there's so many opportunities. And even today, you don't even have to come to Washington, D.C. There's a lot of opportunities that are available to work for the government in D.C. across the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Benjamin, I really appreciate you. It's great getting back together again and to be able to kind of go through. I learned a lot about your background too that I didn't realize. I didn't understand the Florida connection there, but yeah, did any of your other family come up here?
Yeah, so I actually both. So now the three boys now work for the federal government. My oldest brother works for DHS for TSA.
Oh, okay.
He works in Miami, Florida.
Oh.
And then my other brother Roger is still in Washington D.C. and now he's also working for DHS. He's working as an economist in the Citizenship and Immigration Services.
Do you miss Florida?
Yes, I mean not during this time of the year, but in the winter, it's hard to. Would love to be on the beach and with the sun in the January-February timeframes.
Yeah, well, it's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. It's great seeing you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.